It's my pleasure to join you here today to address such an esteemed audience in a critical time for the European Union. On one hand, we are faced with existential threats to Ukraine and entire post-Cold War security order. On another hand, we need to take bold steps in securing our own future and in boosting the competitiveness of the European economy. Of course, those two challenges are intrinsically linked. Our security and our prosperity are interdependent and mutually reinforcing. Today, I would like to speak about European Commission's implementation and simplification agenda, which is an important part of those efforts. And this time around, we are serious about it. Last Tuesday, the Commission took the first important step towards making EU rules simpler and easier for citizens and businesses. We adopted our strategy on implementation and simplification for the next 5 years, entitled A Simpler and Faster Europe, and our 2025 work programme, announcing a number of specific measures to cut red tape. This signalled the start of a change of a regulatory culture of the European Commission focused on two goals. Making sure that EU rules are as simple and cost-effective as possible, and that they deliver on the ground to achieve our economic, social and environmental goals. Under this new approach, we aim to tackle all sources of regulatory burdens for citizens, companies and administrations. This includes not only reporting, but also other administrative costs related, for example, to permitting, labelling or certification, as well as broader compliance burdens generated by EU rules. We have set ambitious targets for administrative costs, reducing them by 25% for all companies and by 35% for SMEs. This translates into cutting roughly 37.5 billion euros in annual administrative costs by the end of this Commission's mandate. Commissioners will gradually stress test existing EU rules to deliver proposals for simplification, and they will be reporting regularly on progress, including to the European Parliament and Council. They will also carry at least 2 implementation dialogues with stakeholders per year, and the Commission services will liaise regularly with practitioners on the ground through reality checks. These 2 new consultation approaches will help us to identify what works and what needs to be improved in the application of EU rules, foster good practices and prepare meaningful simplification proposals. When it comes to the legislative proposals, we will apply stronger checks to avoid hurting our competitiveness and SMEs. And we will scrutinise delegated and implementing acts to avoid creating more costs. The work to deliver real change has already started. 11 out of 18 new initiatives in the Commission work programme for 2025 are aimed at simplification, and they are complemented by 37 evaluations and fitness checks, which in turn will feed more simplification work. Over the coming months, the Commission will be delivering simplification packages in the areas of sustainability reporting, EU investment instruments, small mid-caps, digital tools and agriculture, and not only. The first proposals will focus on the triangle formed by the taxonomy regulation, the directive on corporate sustainability due diligence, and the corporate sustainability reporting directive. They will combine targeted changes to primary legislation as well to secondary and implementing rules. They will seek to simplify each piece of legislation as well as to ensure coherence between them. They will pursue a better alignment of requirements with the needs of investors, proportionate timelines, financial metrics that do not discourage investments in smaller companies in transition, and more proportionate obligations relative to the scale of activities of different companies. They will also address the trickle-down effect so that smaller companies present in supply chains are not subjected to excessive reporting requirements that were never intended by legislators. In addition, we will also put forward targeted changes to the carbon border adjustment mechanism to avoid excessive burdens on smaller players. In the current economic and geopolitical context, the Commission believes that these changes are urgent. Hence, we are moving fast and are working intensively with the Parliament and Council also for this purpose. We will outline on the same day proposals to simplify the functioning and optimize the lending capacity of InvestEU and alleviate burdens on final recipients. Ladies and gentlemen, with this, I hope I have given you a good snapshot of what the Commission is working on and what is coming up. But I would like to address a couple of broader questions now. First, it is fair to say that the Commission's simplification agenda has attracted a lot of attention. It has raised hopes among many, but also some concerns. Much of this hinges on the difference between simplification and deregulation. The European Council has called for a simplification revolution, for drastically reducing administrative, regulatory and reporting burdens, and for adopting an enabling mindset based on trust, allowing business to flourish without excessive regulation. The Commission has laid out the ambitious approach that I just explained and is committed to delivering far-reaching simplification. But we have also been clear that our simplification agenda will not be aimed at deregulation. Our proposals will not promote private profits built on negative externalities or undermine our social or environmental goals. But those proposals will be ambitious. As highlighted in the Draghi report, the accumulation of rules over time, the increased complexity and implementation challenges are limiting our economic potential and our prosperity. Our engagement with stakeholders confirms that. Today, regulation is seen by more than 60% of EU companies as an obstacle to investment, with 55% of SMEs flagging regulatory obstacles and administrative burdens as their greatest challenge. The past 5 years were a period of very intense regulatory activity when Europe showed its determination to tackle the challenges and opportunities from the green and digital transitions. However, this intense regulatory activity also generated a large and still expanding regulatory burden. As we take stock of the impact of this regulatory activity, a major problem has now become apparent. The accumulation of burdens creates a volume of demands on people and companies that freeze innovation, deter investment, and encourage economic activities to move to other jurisdictions. This in turn makes our citizens poorer and undermines our ability to collectively reach our economic, social and environmental goals. It also makes us more vulnerable to outside demands and influence. It is therefore imperative that we drastically reduce those burdens, not to abandon our objectives, but rather to improve our ability to reach them in practice. In addition to this internal reality, the international environment has also changed radically over the past months. Some of the most powerful economies around the world are now pursuing regulatory approaches that are diametrally opposed to those that had been rightly pursued by the EU. In some cases, these jurisdictions are prohibiting their businesses to comply with EU requirements, which in turn hurts our ability of our companies to source scarce and essential inputs and raw materials. This in turn puts our ability to secure the green and digital transitions and to develop a new European industrial leadership at risk. The problems is compounded by restrictions that we place on exploitation of those natural resources at home, outsourcing possible environmental damages to third countries without reaping the economic or security benefits. So let me be clear, to preserve our prosperity and our security, we have no choice but to confront these external realities. Our regulatory framework must become more agile and responsive to this changing environment. Without pursuing in earnest the interests of European workers and companies, we will not be able to deliver on the Green Deal. Ladies and gentlemen, Over the past 5 years, I was responsible for delivering, together with a Commissioner for Employment at that time, the most ambitious ever implementation of the European Pillar of Social Rights. And I am deeply convinced that Europe's unique social market economy is one of our strongest competitive advantages. I also believe that our values and standards of democracy, equality, shared prosperity and protection of the environment have driven and will continue to drive economic and social progress here. Yet fundamental changes are needed in some other areas in line with our competitiveness compass. First, we need to make the EU an easier place for innovative companies to grow. Second, we need to make Europe a better place to invest. And third, we need to make doing business in Europe cheaper, both in terms of energy costs and regulatory burden. The difficult realities that I have laid out in my speech today demand bold change of our policy making. Changing is hard. It requires looking with a critical eye on what has been done. It requires clarity of purpose. It also needs to be clearly explained. The European Commission remains committed to the green and digital transitions and to building an even fairer and more prosperous continent for our citizens. The simplification of regulatory burden is an important part of this puzzle. In this context, I feel honoured to have been given the responsibility to coordinate the Commission's efforts to deliver on our ambitious simplification agenda. I hope to count on your support and cooperation to make a real difference on Europe's companies and workers. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Commissioner, stay where you are, please. As in previous events, the question and answer session will be moderated by journalist Mr. Chris Burns. And after the Q&A session, Commissioner Dombrovskis will have a few minutes for closing remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Diego. Thank you. Welcome, everybody. And I look forward to getting your questions written as clearly and as concisely as possible. That would be a huge help. Valdis, nice to see you again. We've done many interviews together, many events together.
Indeed.
For, gosh, more than a decade or so, decade and a half. And now this new job you have, because you were in the last commission, but this time you're in charge of a lot of things. Economy, trade, social rights, Eurogroup, carbon border adjustment mechanism, EBRD, EIB, and other things. How do you balance all of that? How do you get any sleep?
Of course, as you noted, it's large portfolio, not quite as large as you described, by the way. I'm not longer dealing with trade. So passed this to other colleague, to Maris Šefčovič, but so my portfolio is economy and productivity and implementation and simplification. And indeed, it keeps me busy. I was telling to some colleagues in the morning. So once I took this job on implementation and simplification, I get incredible amount of requests for meetings. I have never seen something like this in any of my previous tasks, and I couldn't understand what is going on. This topic is so burning that the amount of requests for meetings is such that it's impossible to deal with this. But then I understood that now I'm a commissioner for everything, because whatever
that
sector,
simplifies it, doesn't it?
No, because whatever sector, they obviously go to their sectoral commissioners to discuss their sector, but then, since I'm in charge of simplification, then they also come to me to discuss simplification in that sector. And so it's completely across the board, so I'm still learning to handle it.
Well, and then you mentioned you do want to simplify things. You talked about different things you want to simplify. Can we talk about one specific example? You mentioned due diligence, which is, set off alarm bells in the business community, but then, of course, among the NGOs, they're saying, well, it's about time that we were able to trace these suppliers around the world who might be using slave labor and other unethical measures. Is that out the window then? Or how much are we going to save from due diligence? What are we going to throw out?
Well, on due diligence, indeed. So this is one of the pieces of legislation we are looking at, and there we want to provide more proportionality and more clarity to businesses also as regards their civil liability, because it's clear that currently the civil liability risks are very very difficult to pinpoint, maybe very unpredictable for businesses, may turn as a, even some kind of a business case for some other players. So we need to provide much more clarity there, so that businesses are engaging and trying to control something which they can halfway realistically control. And also we're looking especially on different sizes of companies, what they can realistically do, instilling some proportionality, more proportionality there as well.
Right, as you said, reduce regulation and red tape by 35% for SMEs and 25% for the bigger companies, right? So you're focused.
That's an overall goal. Yeah, that's an overall goal.
Yeah. Okay, let me go to a question here. What is the plan for regulation that may cause trouble on supply chains? This is kind of relevant to that. Shared by civil and defense. What are your plans for, I guess, reducing regulation on supply chains regarding civil and defense?
I probably don't quite understood the substance of the question, but it's very clear, and right now we have engaged very intensively also from European Commission side. The events of recent weeks, I think, clearly show that we'll be less able to rely on US for European security, so we'll have to take security matters more into our own hands. We will need to strengthen our defense capabilities, we will need to strengthen our defense industry, and correspondingly this will require much larger defense spending, and currently in the European Commission we are working to how to increase it both at the EU level and at national level, providing more flexibility, escape clauses to member states to deal with this, and we'll be looking also obviously how to streamline the defense industry across the EU, reduce fragmentation, ensure necessary supplies, looking also at dual-use items, and on many occasions, as you know, EU is not directly financing defense, but may finance dual-use items. Probably that's a question heading in that direction, may support things like military mobility, other aspects. So we're looking not only on the hard defense, where we'll obviously have to do more, but also on dual use and interplay between the two.
Okay, question on the timeline of this. What does the sustainability omnibus mean for companies reporting in 2025-26? Any changes that you make, will that affect this year, next year?
Well, that's obviously true, and so we are looking now also at possibility of having some, so to say, pause or suspension of certain pieces of legislation while the legislative process is ongoing. But it's true that at the end of the day there are going to be some changes on those pieces of legislation, which probably will not be completely in line with companies have been preparing now. So how to see for this transition. But the point is that at the end of the day we need to arrive at lower recurring annual administrative costs, and that will then probably it will create certain inconveniences for a year, but then if we manage to bring the recurring annual costs down, then it will mean savings for many years, if not decades.
How do you ensure that while simplifying, you don't run after competitiveness and productiveness, I guess, at the expense of workers' rights. Some consider EV's occupational health to simplify rules as administrative burden. Anyway, the concern about workers' rights.
Yeah. That's obviously an important point. That's why I was also mentioning my work in a previous mandate on European Pillar of Social Rights, because I think we have our unique European social market economy model, which serves us well and which we obviously need to preserve. And that's why I highlighted also that with the simplification, we do not mean deregulation, so we do not abolish our high social or environmental standards, and that obviously goes for workers' rights. And obviously, when we're discussing simplification proposals in that area, it will be very important that representatives of social partners from both sides, from employers and employees, are present in those discussions and their views are taken into account.
Okay, let me come back to due diligence. Here's a question on that. You want to prevent trickle-down reporting for SMEs. How will larger corporates they supply get the information they need to do their due diligence?
Well, that's exactly what we need to address, and that's why exactly why this trickle down is happening. Because on one hand, we have exemptions for SMEs or simplified reporting standards for SMEs, but on the other hand, larger companies need to do their reporting, so they're basically passing down those requirements to the SMEs down the value chain. So what we want to do is indeed, so on one hand, to stop it, to make sure that larger companies are not passing down those reporting requirements, but then obviously also providing larger companies with clarity how the simplified information they are getting from SMEs is sufficient for their own reporting. Obviously, that is another part of the puzzle which we are dealing with.
Okay. How can we prevent that simplification at the EU level is undone by new member state level legislation?
This is so-called gold plating effect, and we are in contact with member states also on this, because on one hand, indeed, that may kind of reduce the effectiveness of our simplification work, but on the other hand, if each member state is gold plating then something in a different way, it also leads to the fragmentation of a single market. And that's, for example, Ambassador was talking also in his introductory remarks exactly about this point. But there, of course, we cannot, prohibit or prevent member states for doing their legislation, but there we need engagement and coordination. But generally speaking, we sense that this understanding of the need to simplify in member states is there. I mentioned those Budapest European Summit conclusions calling for simplification revolution. Okay, revolution or not, but it shows that also member states are seriously demanding the simplification, and I know that many member states already themselves are engaging in the simplification of their own legislation.
Yeah, and the Council has to sign off on this stuff anyway, right? I mean,
exactly. So whatever we'll put forward as a legislative proposals will have to go through co-legislators, Council and European Parliament.
Yeah. I'll get back to that, but here, how about this? Do you and does the Commission have a feeling of an absolute emergency due to the new challenges coming from the U.S., all those things signed by Sharpie just about every day? How does it influence your list of priorities? Because before you, we had Teresa Rivera, and she was saying, well, nothing's happened yet, we'll wait and see. Well, it's not wait and see anymore, is it?
Indeed. When this Commission was starting work, we put forward two horizontal priorities. One was competitiveness, including the simplification, but it's actually much broader, and another was security.
So you already had that in
the priorities
in the works.
Were there, and from that point of view, the events of last couple of weeks are confirming that those are really the priorities we'll need to deal with this. But the events of last week certainly have added to the sense of urgency. So that's why I was mentioning some things which Commission is now working just maybe for a week, which is on substantially increasing our own defense spending. And that's why we're looking what can be done through the European EU budget still during this multi-annual financial framework, which is until 2027. Because obviously we're working also for the next multi-annual financial framework, which is post-2027, but that will start in 2028. If we do programming as we typically do, money will not start flowing before 2029, and that's obviously too late. We need to act now. So we're looking now in existing MFF, what we can change, how we can make sure that this money flows to strengthen our defense. And we will be providing also additional flexibility to EU member states by activating the escape clauses so that member states can spend more on defense without breaching the EU fiscal rules. So this is something as a direct response to the recent events. Then obviously we also need to step up support for Ukraine. Possibly filling some gaps which US may be leaving. And there is not so much about financial support, because on financial support it's also the estimate of IMF and our and Ukrainian own that the financing need for this year for Ukraine is covered thanks to our Ukraine facilities, thanks to G7 era loans, but it's about military supplies which are certainly much needed for Ukraine now.
Yeah, which we've ramped up over the past year. What about a couple items on that? That you mentioned Ukraine. What about sanctions? Could we see new sanctions? It looks like Hungary is going to stand in the way of that.
Well, yeah, indeed. So we are getting mixed signals from the new administration on what and how they will do with the sanctions. Well, on EU side, we continue to apply sanctions. As you know, just a few days ago, we reached an agreement on 16th sanction package. And we think it's important that we keep pressure against aggressor Russia.
Okay, and then on assets, Russian assets, that seems to be a bugbear among the EU27. I think there's been reluctance on the part of the Belgians, for instance.
Indeed, as regards Russian assets, that's something which we are looking at currently. As we know, Russian assets are being used, so Russian assets are generating profits, and those profits are being used for Ukraine, basically to repay the G7 loan.
Yeah, that's so the Belgian argument, is that keep using the profits.
Yeah, that is what's happening right now, and obviously if we take any other decisions, we need to look what happens with this era loan mechanism in this case. That's in any case a factor which we need to keep into account. But obviously there is a principle in international law that aggressor is responsible for the damage it's creating, so we will how to look into ways how we make sure that Russia is paying for the damage it's creating in Ukraine. Well, one decision has been taken already a while ago by G7 that those Russian immobilized assets will not be released before Russia pays reparations to Ukraine.
Okay. Let me come back to these reforms. Mention was made of the political dynamics of the Council, but what about the Parliament? Could the Commissioner debate on the envisaged support in that House? Could you discuss that aspect of the Parliament, because there is pushback there, given all the recent letters from some of the main political groups? You're getting pushback, right?
Yeah. Well, I would call it more than an aspect, because if we propose legislative changes, they have to go through co-legislators, including European Parliament. So obviously we'll need to have European Parliament on board. Already we are engaging intensively with European parliamentarians from different political groups, and will continue this work. I would say there is an understanding that we need to do this simplification and reduce administrative burdens. There may be also concerns expressed, indeed, as you rightly noted, by Parliament. There may be a varying degree of ambition on how far different political groups are willing to go on this. That all obviously will require discussions and compromises.
Okay. Let's go on the financial side. How does the simplification agenda interact with the Savings and Investment Union? Is simplification part of the thinking around the supervisory architecture for Europe?
Simplification is covering all sectors. As I was saying, each member of the Commission is responsible for simplification in his or her area. Will be stress testing the entire European acquis. So it means that simplification will be covering all policy areas. Obviously, it concerns also financial services. On savings and investments union, that work in any case is important to mobilize the amount of investment which we need for our green and digital transitions, but also for other purposes, and it's clear that the bulk of this investment will have to be private, and that's why we need to make progress with the capital markets union or with the savings and investments union. Because Europeans are great savers. I have somewhere this figure, I may be mistaken, but like 1.8 trillion euros, which there are retail savings in the EU, which could be put to the productive use to finance European economy, to finance European companies, to generate actually also a larger return on investment from those savings than if they are just diddling on the bank accounts. So we have a great potential, yet our share of capital markets financing of the economy is much lower than that in the US. So certainly there is scope for improvement, and that's the purpose of this savings and investments union.
Yeah, that's why a lot of people are calling for the banking union to provide more liquidity for companies. Here's a question now. You did talk about simpler and faster Europe. Here's a question on that. We might have been going too fast over the last years while regulating, and have also made some mistake while regulating, and also made some mistakes which we try to fix now with simplification. How will we avoid going too fast now in the other direction and make mistakes there?
First of all, I was outlining this approach, how we are going to go about simplification, obviously with strong stakeholder involvement. And we had been engaging intensively with stakeholders to discuss what is working, what is not, what needs to be streamlined, what needs to be simplified. So one point is that we are getting the right feedback on what we need to do. Then also it's important looking forward, how we are approaching the new legislation. And that's where I was highlighting that we'll be doing also more seriously the competitiveness and SME tests. Making sure that also the new legislation has those competitiveness and SME angles in mind from the very early stages before even we put forward the legislative proposal. So it's both to stress test the previous acquis, what we're also doing, but also changing the way we are working looking forward.
No plans for an EU Doge, right, I guess?
No. We are, I think we have been clear, we are not engaging in deregulation, and we will not entering in some kind of deregulation race with US or whatever.
Race to the bottom.
No.
Right. How is this simplification process expected to impact the agri-food sector and the small and local producers? You know, in mind that a lot of people are upset over higher prices, right?
Indeed. So I was mentioning the European Commission's 2025 work program and our simplification initiatives there. And one of the simplification initiatives is exactly the package on simplification of common agricultural policy. And Commissioner Hansen is already working on this.
Okay, here's something specific on timeline. Will the omnibus on simplification be proposed on February 26th, or will there be a delay?
Well, that's a plan to go for February 26th.
Okay, all right, you're sticking to the plan. Okay, great. Could we have one example when a report from another prevented a scandal and accident? I didn't quite get that. Sorry about that. Here's another question, is on data centers. One of your responsibilities is to improve competitiveness in the Union. To achieve this, it is essential that we address the digital transformation in parallel with the energy transition in such a way as to guarantee that our data is stored in the EU, powered by renewable energy. Is the Commission going to establish, here's the question finally, is the Commission going to establish specific plans to achieve the accelerated deployment of data centers in the member states?
Well, that's exactly where those difficulties are catching up with me. Being commissioner for everything is difficult. I do not, cannot deep dive in those nuances, like specifically on data centers. But I can say a couple of words on digitalization from our simplification angle. Because one of our simplification proposals will be also a digital package, looking at also how to simplify matters related to cybersecurity, cyber resilience, but also other elements. Also, we'll be focusing on using digital tools for simplification, for example, by creation of European data hubs where we are sourcing to the extent possibly directly data from member states without having companies or administrations to report this data in different formats for different purposes, but rather creating those data hubs where this data is available and can be used by different supervisory authorities or whatever authorities for the purposes they need. Also, we'll be looking at how to eliminate whatever is still left of paper-based reporting for European companies. So this digital angle will certainly be strongly present in our simplification agenda, but on specific points on digital developments, I would say Executive Vice President Virkkunen would be better placed to respond to them.
Okay. What are your views on the role of national competition authorities in carrying out the EU agenda?
We will be certainly looking at also how the EU competition rules work. That's probably, only partly linked with simplification, but we need to see where do we have this right balance. Because on one hand, we want companies to scale up in Europe. We want European champions. We want large companies which are able to compete globally. But on the other hand, our competition rules often create difficulties and obstacles for this. Of course, it's a careful balance to be found because, yes, we also need a level playing field in a single market. But on the other hand, we need also space for companies to grow and to be globally competitive, and that will be concerning the work both how we deal with the competition matters at the EU level, but also how then also national competition authorities deal with those matters in each member state.
Now, just that you mentioned the single market, here's a question relevant to that. One of the biggest barriers is market fragmentation. To what extent will the simplification agenda seek to integrate the single market as an opportunity for growth and competitiveness? As Draghi and Letta reports have been calling for.
Indeed, that's strongly present in our agenda. I was mentioning in my speech competitiveness compass, which will drive our work in the area of competitiveness during this mandate. So we will be looking at different competitiveness factors which are affecting the European economy and how to address them. And we are seeing the removal of barriers in a single market as a horizontal enabling factor. So single market and functioning of single market is part of this agenda. So on one hand, that's also implementation work, making sure that EU rules are properly implemented without creating fragmentation. On the other hand, it's also work with member states concerning the gold plating, which we touched upon, because that's another source of the fragmentation in a single market.
Okay, let's go back to food. You mentioned the simplification initiative for agriculture. Will this go beyond simplifying just the CAP, the Common Agricultural Policy structure? Will this look more broadly at food production?
The work on this simplification of agriculture is currently ongoing, and it's also building on strategic discussions on the future of agriculture, which were launched already last year. At this stage, I cannot tell exactly how broad the package will be, what exactly it will entail, but in any case, in preparation of this package, we'll also organize events with stakeholders, so there's going to be stakeholders engagement, so it will be possible to provide those views, raise various points, and the end result of the package will be taking also this input of stakeholders into account.
Okay, let me see if I get this right. International environment, the question on international environment. Third countries have problems to comply with EU regulation, mirror clauses pop out everywhere. How to reflect on third countries' complaints about complying with that regulation?
Indeed, that is something which we are hearing quite a bit. Complaints of our regulation, like on CBAM, we had heard many concerns from many countries on our deforestation regulations. There had been many concerns expressed. Mirror clauses, currently we are not broadly applying mirror clauses, but it is something which is also in discussion and obviously also raise concerns in third countries. So there, of course, the best approach which we can have is to respect our international commitments and to respect rules-based international order, including in the area of trade, including correspondingly the WTO rules. Because it's clear that if every jurisdiction starts to do whatever they want without regard to the international commitments, that will make the world even more fragmented and conflictual. That will create substantial damage to the world economy. There are estimates, by the way, what happens if this global economic fragmentation takes place. That can result over the medium term on 7% smaller world GDP. It's like taking Germany's and France's combined economy out of the world map, so it's quite substantial negative economic impact. And for the EU as a open economy where the trade of share of trade is actually quite large, it's very important also for our competitiveness and prosperity to maintain this rules-based international order, but then it's important that we are ourselves also not undermining it.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk digital. While the EU recognizes the need to put digital at the forefront to make it competitive, you still got lots of rules like GDPR, Data Services Act, Digital Services Act, Digital Markets Act, DSA, DMA, to comply with. How does the Commission plan to simplify that framework and enable the industry to compete on the global market?
Well, I was already mentioning that one of the packages which will be putting forward on simplification is a digital package, and that will be an occasion to look at all those various pieces of legislation, what's need to be simplified, how they are interacting. So that's certainly one of the work streams which is in front of us.
Okay, good. Does the European Commission intend to address the burden of CBAM, the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism plans on downstream users, not just on the EU market, but also for exports, where they are a huge competitive disadvantage against third country competitors, not based on carbon prices?
Well, yes, I understand this question, and I often have this impression that this whole CBAM debate we are having is somehow upside down. Because what is creating competitive challenges is not CBAM. CBAM is there to mitigate those challenges. So the question is why there is a CBAM, because there is a decision that in a context of European Green Deal, as of 2026, we will start putting price of carbon on our energy-intensive industries like steel, aluminium, cement, fertilizers, and so on. And then, of course, it's a question of carbon leakage. So if we put price on carbon, this production just will move somewhere else, and then we'll be importing the same energy-intensive products produced probably with lower standards and more pollution. So that's not what we want to aim. Therefore, we are introducing CBAM to mitigate this effect and saying that then the importers will have to pay the same price of carbon which we are putting on our own producers to restore the level playing field. And if importers or producers in third countries are paying for price of carbon in their own countries, we deduct this from CBAM. So making clear that it's environmental measure, that it's WTO compatible measure. So it's not a CBAM which is putting burden on European producers, but the price of carbon which we are putting on European producers, but that's our decision in a framework of European Green Deal, and obviously that then raises some questions for downstream users and competitiveness of those products for exports. Okay.
There are so many questions, and I have about 6 minutes left. It's l'embarras du choix, as we say. Something on migration. You don't deal with migration, though, do you? But that's one thing that you don't deal with.
At least something I don't deal with. Yeah.
So I think I'm going to skip that one, unfortunately. Okay. Some of these are so lengthy, it's very, very difficult to read through. Something to remember the next time. Let's see. No. I don't read Sanskrit. Sorry about that. The role of the regions. We can help with the SMEs, bottom-up approach, to gather and channel information for the Commission. Anyway, this is, I guess, an offer of help from the role of the regions, the government of Valencia region. Maybe working on the regional level, how do you work with them? Because quite often, I guess, there's that criticism of it's all just top-down, it's the Commission that declares the rules. How much are you listening to the people on the ground?
The role of the regions, that obviously depends on specific policies, because there are certain policies where engagement of regions is obvious, like, for example, our cohesion policy, where we are working very closely with regions, and where it's important also thinking about the next multi-annual financial framework, that we maintain this framework of shared management, of partnership principle with regions, and working closely with them. The same is true, for example, for our recovery and resilience facility, where even though we must admit we also got some criticism for not engaging sufficiently in regions and for member states not engaging sufficiently in regions when drafting their recovery and resilience plans. I think it's important lesson which we need to take into account when thinking about our next multi-annual financial framework. So obviously this cooperation and engagement of regions is an important part of this equation.
Okay, good. Quick question, final question. Bulgaria and the euro. I think you've made some. What have been your? What's the feedback from your the euro group? Do you think Bulgaria can get in to the euro?
Yeah.
By next year.
Indeed. So in our last Eurogroup meeting, we had Bulgarian Minister Petkova present and to present Bulgaria's preparations for euro adoption. So basically, Bulgaria is working very intensively on this. So now what's important that all the Maastricht criteria are met. So the question there primarily concerns inflation. So inflation is going down and getting closer to reference value, but I would say so to say, the inflation developments are a bit less favorable than we were forecasting some half a year ago. So that's something to watch. Then it's obviously important that Bulgaria respects the EU fiscal rules and presents its medium-term fiscal structural plan in line with a fiscal framework, because that's an important element which we are also monitoring in a context of Maastricht criteria. There are some elements related to the independence of central bank which still need to be fixed, and there's still some work on some of the post-ERM2 entry commitments. So those are the main elements, but this work is well advanced on all of these. Bulgarian government is very engaged, so I am moderately optimistic that things will work out and Bulgaria will be able to join as of January 2026.
Great. Okay. Fantastic. We end on a high note. That's great. Valdis, thank you. So, Valdis, stay where you are. One more little quick word, right, from David Lengo, head of Indra in Brussels. By the way, congratulations. Indra bought Hispasat. You're going more deeper into satellite communications under the umbrella of Indra Space. So that's for civilian and military. It's quite interesting. And Indra is one of our sponsors. Please, David.
Thank you very much, dear Chris. José Luis and Diego, thanks a lot because you are organizing the best breakfast debates in Brussels.
Hey, yeah.
Thank you very much, Mr. Commissioner, for your excellent intervention. Thanks a lot. I speak on behalf of 5 European companies, Indra, Airbus, IAG, Solaria, and Telefonica, who are committed to making Europe a player, not a playground, and the European Union, a player, not a playground. That is to say, a more competitive and secure player in a world of disorder. In 2010, the President of the US, President Obama, made a speech, and I quote, he said, "There is no sense for China to have better rail systems than us, and for Singapore to have better airports than us. And we just learned that China now has the fastest supercomputer on Earth. That used to be us." That Used to Be Us is the title of a book written by Tom Friedman some years ago, before President Trump started to show off his Make America Great Again. I have the impression that, in fact, this MAGA is the simplification of the reaction to a harsh reality of a strategic competition based on hard power and technology. However, it may well be also the consequence of a profound sentiment of resignation in the US citizens, in the average citizen. Sometimes I feel we have the same tone of resignation in Europe. The harsh reality, and you know I live in Brussels, is that to refurbish Rond-Point Schuman in Brussels takes more time than building up a squadron of frigates in China or launching a complete satellite constellations by the Americans in low orbit. And we should not get used to it. We need entrepreneurial ambition and political will, especially on those projects and actions that unite us more to be better day after day together. We need entrepreneurial ambition and political will. So, well, we reap what we sow. My conclusion is that we must keep sowing. We shall not give up. We five, our 5 companies, are very much appreciate your messages today, Mr. Commissioner, and your action. We wish you a very successful mandate and the best of luck. Thank you very much, Mr. Dombrovskis.
A quick word from Valdis that, by the way, it's quite impressive that you graduated in economics and in physics. You worked in a physics laboratory. You have that background of taking the long view of the process. I've never seen you flustered in the interviews. You keep a steady hand, and I think that's probably the best type of person to be commissioner for everything, isn't it? Please.
Yeah, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, once again, thank you for this invitation to this Forum Europa and for this opportunity to have this exchange. Also, I would say here, the number of questions and engagement we are having is showing that this simplification agenda now is very important. It is very topical. It's important for our competitiveness, for strengthening and in some occasions regaining our industrial leadership. So let's work all together and let's deliver on this goal, and let's deliver on our ambitious policy goals and make sure that our social market economy continues to prosper. Thank you.
Valdis Dombrovskis, thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks for all your questions.